All right, everyone, Jeff here at StopThePirates.blogspot.com. Yeah. Now, I was going to talk about today is where we've come, from the start of this so-called country that we're living in. The Articles of Confederation were agreed to by the United States and Congress assembled on November 15, 1777, and were ratified March 1st, 1781. From the time of the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776, to the time of the Articles of Confederation, there was a space of time of 16 months and 11 days. During this period of time, the several nation states, countries were sovereign unto themselves as relates to foreign earthly powers. There was an outstanding debt due for the war, the Revolutionary War, of 17 million silver lira from French banks over 21 separate occasions, all due on December 1st, 1789. Therefore, the bankruptcy chapter had to be drafted. On September 17, 1787, 12 state delegates approved the Constitution that states have now become the constitutors. Constitutor in civil law, one who by simple agreement becomes responsible for the payment of another's debt. So the states were now liable for the debt owed to the king, but the people of America were not. The people are not a party to the Constitution because it was never put to them for a vote. The judge in the Paddleford case stated, "But indeed, no private person has a right to complain by suit in court on the ground of a breach of the Constitution. The Constitution, it is true, is a compact, but he is not a party to it." You can't walk into any one of these administrative courts and go, my constitutional rights, they'll laugh you out of it. The states are the parties to it, and they may complain. If they do, they are entitled to redress, or they may waive the right to complain. Articles establish a sovereign nation of people, but all constitutions are bankruptcy charters or compacts. President Andrew Jackson paid the debt in the 1830s, and in 1832, while discussing the bank renewal bill to a delegation of bankers, he said, "You're all a den of vipers and thieves. I intend to rout you out, and by the eternal God, I will rout you out." The Articles of Confederation are still in operation. Patrick Henry, boycotted the Constitutional Convention of 1787 because, as he so eloquently put it, "I smell a rat," and suspected the worst, that the independent colonies that had thrived for over a century were to be herded under one consolidated government, a vast government apparatus founded not on liberty, but on bureaucratic dreams of monarchists and mercantilists like Alexander Hamilton. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute a new government. Samuel Adams said, "When the people fear the government, they have tyranny. When the government fears the people, they have freedom." Anyway, yeah, so the Constitution is it's basically an IOU. That's why they endorse it on the back like a check. And why would they pay back? I mean, you just had a Revolutionary War, and you defeated the biggest army and navy in the world, and why would you pay them back money? I don't know. I guess. And why would the king finance both sides of the Revolutionary War? Because that's how they make their money. Democracy is defined as that form of government in which the sovereign power resides in and is exercised by the whole body of free citizens, directly or indirectly, through a system of representatives. That's why when you register to vote, when you're born, you're given this It's a state, basically, with unlimited amount of credit through, these exemption accounts and these certificate trusts. But what you're doing when you're registering with one of these political parties is you're saying, look, I can't handle my affairs on my own. This is state. I don't know what it is, what to do with it. So here, you take care of it. Okay? You handle it for me. And that's what they're doing. You never went back to them and said, hey, I want to take control of my estate back. And that's what they don't want you to know. Democracy expands and conquers by deceit and fraud and uses words of art to deceive, convinces Americans to utilize such words in terms as residence, reside, and U.S. citizen, regional designations, fictional overlays such as for California, you have CA, Nevada, NV, TX for Texas, etc., in addresses to expand its venue and control and obtain certificates of birth and to sign up for Social Security and gain and maintain jurisdiction. It gives away Americans' rights, lands, parks, and streams over to a foreign government, such as the United Nations, by executive orders or by decree, and calling them biospheres, biosphere reserves, World Heritage Sites, or some other designated name. This corporate so-called government sees itself as God. It sets morals and values of those in its jurisdiction without any basis. These values are ever changing and at their whim and are influenced by opinion in the media, emphasizes religious and social tolerance, but discourages Christianity. It provokes the godly to give up their stand and to go with the crowd. Homosexuality and abortions are no longer discouraged, but are now protected. Speaking of that, here in California, they're going to recall Governor Gavin Newsom, Gruesome Newsom, and this is already a lock. The guy in the dress, Bruce Jenner, which this whole thing has been planned. When you look at it now, you go, oh, okay, I see it now. But he's going to be installed, and voting is a joke. All the machines are rigged. It's all rigged. I mean, obviously rigged. Why vote? It's you're just hurting yourself when you contract with these people. On April 15th, 1861, President Lincoln reconvened Congress under the executive branch proclamation number, I do hereby, in virtue of the power in me vested by the Constitution, convene both houses of Congress. Caesar, which is the president, is now in full control even over the Senate and the Congress. A presidential dictatorship has been imposed on the U.S. citizens, and sad thing is most American people don't even realize it yet. This corporate government created in 1871 will continue to exist as long as a state of war or emergency exists. War on drugs, war on poverty, war on terrorism, war on Iraq, war on pandemics. The president does not terminate martial or emergency powers by executive order or decree, or the people do not resist submission and terminate by restoring lawful civil courts, processes, and procedures under the authority of inherent political powers of the people. The 14th Amendment, for all intents and purposes, does not exist. On March 28, 1861, Congress adjourned sine die and never has reconvened de jure. The original 13th Amendment, no titles of nobility, approved by 13 of the 17 states, March 12, 1819, and thereby ratified, is the last proper draft of de jure amendment, but is not recognized by the corporate de facto United States. The original 13th Amendment prohibits esquires or attorneys from holding positions of public office. The president, a Caesar, rules by executive order, which is unconstitutional. Congress and the courts are under the president. Did you ever wonder why Congress is ignored by the president? The president is the chief executive officer, CEO of the government corporation. Impeachment today is nearly impossible unless it is in the best interest of the controlling bankers and the one world government elite. Also, what people do not realize is that most courts today are legislative courts and not judicial. The so-called corporate Congress sits by resolution, not by positive law. Therefore, the position of power is as follows. President and CEO of the corporation sits as Caesar, does not need congressional approval. The legislature, the new Congress, and Senate voices public opinion. So-called judicial, legislative, Article 1 courts opinionate what's best for the corporate so-called government and the elite. Non-existent judicial Article 3 courts, except for special circumstances that benefit the elite. The top position has control over the second position, and the second position has control over the last position, vertically and not laterally. There are no checks and balances unless the president is concerned with a potential revolution based on an outcry of its citizens. Each puppet that comes into office wears a different costume, but ends up serving the same master. The masters are the elite and the bankers operating behind the scenes. And they're ruled by their phony money. It's not backed by asset, but thrives on faith alone. Today, all computer programs, stock certificates, financial paper, accounting records, balance sheets and summaries, bills, bonds, promissory notes, bank paper such as checks, etc., use a familiar symbol, which is an S with a line through it. Having only one line through it denotes the amount of debt considered. All notes are IOUs, including Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes are notes that represent debt. The corporate United States is in bankruptcy and has no assets but can only monetize debt. And that's what they do. They sell our debt to all over the world. And we have to pay it back. Police officers and IRS, and they all have guns. The threat of prison. You pay your taxes. All taxes are just interest payments on the debt. Federal Reserve notes, bonds, and other evidence of death, tokens, clad coins having no inherent asset value. A unit of debt is in a cashless society is electronic banking. It's coming soon. Issued by the Federal Reserve Bank, a private corporation created by the Bank of England in 1913 and owned by foreign bankers and investors. The Federal Reserve is a continuation of the exchequer of the Crown of England. Edward Mandell House was instrumental in setting up the Federal Reserve. Some people think the Federal Reserve banks are U.S. government institutions. They are not government institutions. They are private credit monopolies which prey upon the people of the U.S. for the benefit of themselves and their foreign and domestic swindlers and rich and predatory money lenders. Chairman Lewis T. McFadden, Housing, Banking, and Currency Committee, June 10, 1933. Federal Reserve is not listed under the federal government. They're in the white pages along with the Federal Express, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and any other business. Find out for yourself if this is true, and then go to your local law library and look up the case Lewis versus U.S. case number 80-5905, 9th Circuit, June 24th, 1982. It reads in part, examining the organization and function of the Federal Reserve banks and applying the relevant factors, we conclude that the Federal Reserve are not federal instrumentalities, but are independent and privately owned and controlled corporations. Federal Reserve banks are listed neither as wholly owned government corporations under 31 U.S.C. Section 846, nor as mixed ownership corporations under 31 U.S.C. Section 856, 28 U.S.C. Sections 1346, 2671. The amount of Federal Reserve notes printed is based upon the corporate government's borrowing and appetite for debt. For example, if the corporate government prints 100 billion in interest-bearing U.S. bonds, it takes them to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve places the 100 billion in a checking account, and the government writes checks or prints debt currency against the balance. In other words, this private banking system creates so-called money out of thin air, and then the bankers get interest on it forever. In addition, that's a pretty good deal. It's a Ponzi. It's called a Ponzi scheme. Same with your Social Security. That's why they're doing what they're doing now, trying to get rid of a lot of people because time's coming up where they want to collect their, they're getting old enough, they want to collect their Social Security check. But the money's not there. It used to be when they first implemented the income tax, that one person paying their Social Security would pay for the next guy. And now it's gotten so far out of whack, it takes like 20 people to pay one person. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Go to stopthepirates.blogspot.com. Thanks.